people would start off conversations with, the devil is real. There is a devil. Then all of a sudden I saw these people were gathering around her and they were, saying the prayer of exorcism. And I was watching. As he got closer, he was still talking, in some language that I'd never heard it before. They call it the hour of the witches, but essentially they're celebrating. That's the day Satan celebrates his separation. I should say right before I attended this Black Mass, I had met with the woman who was the daughter of the most famous witch in Mexico history.
But you go into this cave. What do you see?
So I went to the very end, and there was this image of the hummingbird wizard.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Joining us right now is the author of The Devil's Best Trick, How the Face of Evil Disappeared, Randall Sullivan. He is a renowned author. Graveyard at the Pacific, Dead Wrong, The Price of Experience, Labyrinth, The Miracle Detective, The Untouchable, many, many other works in his catalog, both in film and television and in books and more. And we're so grateful to have Randall with us today. Good morning to you, Randall. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. Good to be here.
This book is, it's tricky. There's a lot of, let's just say, spooky moments in the book on your journey of going from, is the devil real, to I believe the devil is real. And that's kind of how I took it as your journey, even though you share many other journeys along the way. I want to ask you, can you just describe for us the first experience you ever had with the reality of the devil?
That would have been in Medjugorje. I was having this religious conversion experience while I was there, which was totally unexpected considering where I was coming from. But a lot of the people that I was most connected to and who were, most involved in what was happening with me kept insisting on talking about the devil. I mean, people would start off conversations with, the devil is real. There is a devil. And, well, why are we talking about that? And, I've just gotten used to the idea of believing in God, and now you want me to engage the devil. So, but it felt as if there was something that was making people keep telling me this. And then right before I left, I was at the most intense, fervid religious service I've ever attended, which was the youth festival in Medjugorje. This was right at the climax of the war. A lot of the local people, including, the husband of the visionary I got to know best, were being mobilized to go off and fight in the war. And people were being told they couldn't come into the country. It was terribly dangerous, yet quite a number of these young people had made their way there from all over Europe. And so the service that night had this, spirit of the forces of light fighting back against the forces of darkness. And there was a lot going on that, people were making very strange sounds and responding to, my friend and mentor, Father Slavko, who was kind of wielding a monstrance as he moved through the crowd. And some people were having really strange reactions, making strange sounds as if something inside them, didn't want that near them. And
wow.
But one woman really went into, I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, initially I thought she was having an epileptic fit, but then all of a sudden I saw these people were gathering around her and they were, saying the prayer of exorcism. And I was watching what happened to her, which was, it was just incredible, but I knew something was happening. I could literally feel something coming out of her. The stench, the body posture she got into, I was just overwhelmed by it. I was thinking, this is real. I mean, I'm not imagining this. This isn't some psychological phenomenon, or this is really happening. And I was so overwhelmed by it that, I don't know. I woke up the next morning without a blanket, laying on the little terrace of my my room there, and I somehow, I don't know how I'd gotten there or how I'd made it through the night, but I think the impact of it was so total that I was just overwhelmed and trying to digest it. And yet strange, I felt really tremendous peace and happiness also, because I'm not sure even why that was, other than I'd felt as if I was on the right side.
What a feeling! I can imagine that would be to see that dark side, which I think is it's a very alluring thing, the dark side, right? I think that's part of what some of the messaging in your book, I would argue, is the world is very attracted to the darkness. There's a certain song, it's, of that whispers from the deep and the dark that sort of allures our curiosity and draws us in further and further. And I think that's part of the challenge and the strategy of the occult and the devil. Is he real? Is he not real? What can he offer? What can't he offer? Would you say that's fair?
I'd say that's very fair. If you look at the root word of glamour, for example, I mean, the root of it is some kind of false or demonic enchantment. So they're very related. And bear in mind that I was in Bosnia as a correspondent for Rolling Stone magazine, where I'd worked for many years and worked for many years afterward. So
what an experience. But it's what happens in Italy after that is probably the most, I don't know, spooky, if you will.
It was. I mean, it terrified many people, and that's, strange that I wasn't terrified, because the experience, as I've written it, has terrified so many people. Anyway, I arrived back in Rome from Bosnia. It was going to take at least a few days to get a plane back to the U.S. It was very end of August, brutally hot. So I went to the Piazza Navona, which is where I always go when it's hot and I'm in Rome, because the Fountain of Four Rivers creates this beautiful spray. Anyway, I was standing there in the square, surrounded by t-shirt hawkers and people selling balloons and ice cream, and lots of tourists. It was a really crowded square on that hot day, and I saw this fellow walking toward me, and my initial reaction was, wow, quite the gent, because he was dressed so spiffily with a cravat, highly shined shoes that were an odd kind of yellowish brown color. And I was really struck by how, but then I saw his expression, and there was a malevolence in it that was shocking. It was kind of I described it as a malevolent drollery. It was as if he was sort of sneering at everything and me, but with a rage that was there too. And he began to talk really loudly in a language that wasn't Italian. I didn't recognize it. I don't know what it was to this day, but I saw him as he was walking. I saw he was looking directly at me, and he was walking toward me. But I was noticing that no one in the crowd seemed to be aware that this guy was making this huge public scene. It was as if the only one who could see him was me. I mean, that's how it seemed in the way that the crowd didn't react. And as he got closer, he was still talking, in some language that, maybe it was Eastern European, I don't know, but I'd never heard it before. And I had this feeling of sort of a peace, because I sort of realized, he can't really touch me if I don't let him. And I reached inside my shirt and clutched this medal that I'd taken to wearing that summer. It was a medal my mother had given me years ago that I never wore, but for some reason I'd taken it with me on this trip, and I put it on in Medjugorje. It was a scapular medal. And I said, "You can't touch me." And it did seem as if he sort of paused in his tracks, and then he kept walking right up to me and past me. And when he was equal to me, he turned to me and said, "I'll catch you later," in English.
Wow. Why do you think, what do you think his intention was there? Was it to scare you, intimidate you because of what had happened in Medjugorje, or what else?
I could only speculate. I mean, I think he did want to scare me. I think maybe, shake me in some way that would make me doubt, or make me doubt that I was protected. But I can say that was, the reason why I don't recall it with any sense of terror, was because I felt this sort of certainty that I was protected. That he literally couldn't touch me, and
Wow.
so. But when I related that story to other people, they found it terrifying, and people have written, in various places, including the Washington Post, that I claim to have met the devil on Piazza Navona. I never said that. I don't know who or what that was. It didn't seem human to me.
It was something. That much we can say for sure.
That's all I know. Yeah.
You go on to talk about going home after that experience in the book. And of course, your interaction with your son, seeing the dog with red eyes, which has caught my attention because I have a personal devotion to St. Padre Pio, who was attacked by demons almost every night. And he also, as a child, would see that same dog with the red eyes. That was a very common occurrence in his life. Some of the other stuff you talk about in the book, Michelle, the bounty hunter, tracker, 4 foot nothing, just, amazing story and character that you encounter, and your time in Mexico really piqued my curiosity. In your appendix, even, you talk about some of the resources that you relied upon. Some of my favorites, actually, Bernal Diaz in his journal, when he was with Hernan Cortez in Mexico in the 16th century. Bernal was on all 3 of the expeditions, actually.
Yes.
It is a fascinating read. Most people have never read it, number one. Number two, they're only regurgitating that which they've been told either in public high school, college, or whatever. There's a lot of revisionist history going on there. So the original sources are really, really fascinating. And of course, Warren Carroll is one of my favorite Catholic historians, and his recalling of the building of the temple, that the human sacrifice began in Aztec Mexico. I mean, I've been studying this stuff for years. So when I listen to you, or when I read your book, or when I go through this, there is a level of, it goes beyond spooky. It goes to frightening levels. I'm going to be honest with you. Tell me about your time in Mexico. What did you see there? What was the most difficult aspect of what you encounter when it comes to this conflation of religion and the occult?
Well, driving into this place, it's a 6.5 hour drive south from Veracruz into the Mexican jungle. So you're driving through a place that is now under the control of the Zetas, and there are bandits, criminals, and murderers all around. So the sense of menace is, pervasive even before you arrive in Catemaco. And when I got there, I was going to, I had timed it to arrive on what is the day of the year there. It's the first Friday in March, which they call it the Hour of the Witches, but essentially they're celebrating, according to the people who set it up, one witch who set it up. That's the day Satan celebrates his separation from God and the declaration of his own kingdom. And on that day, many demons are on the earth, and the devil and the demons are prepared to grant favors in a special way if you're willing to deal with them. So the people who come there are people who are coming to sell their souls to the devil, or in most cases, you might say, lease their souls to the devil. They're making a deal often that I will be yours. If I should die, my soul will be in the next year, my soul will be forfeit, kind of thing. Some longer if they want more. But also right away, I was really fortunate to find people who could really speak with some authority about what's going on. And the main thing they were telling me is that these brujos, witches, aren't real. These are, they're just sort of performing. There were only two real brujos, and they died long ago. Now, one of them,
But before you move on, I got to tell you, when I read about this performance, it was spooky enough all by itself.
It was terrifying. I mean, it's horrible to watch.
There are many animals that are sacrificed, and
Yes.
in the way in their sacrifice is very reminiscent to the way in which the Aztecs would offer up the humans. 15 seconds apiece is all it would take with their stone knives to cut out the beating hearts, and they wanted the beating heart of the animal, and that blood was what was smeared on their persons asking for favors. I mean, that it might have been performance, but I got to tell you, that's enough to scare most people.
Well, it was deeply disturbing. I mean, they would kill, especially when they killed the goats. It was done in the most cruel, possible way. And I mean, the woman I should say right before I attended this Black Mass, I had met with the woman who was the daughter of the most famous witch in Mexico history, who was a real brujo. And she had said, well, they don't know these new ones, these pretend, they don't know the devil. The devil may use them, but they don't know him, as her father did. So I had that in my mind as I was watching it and realizing that it's disturbing, and they're all, and you're watching people declare that they are forfeiting their souls to get something, and going through the ritual of being bathed in the blood of these sacrificed animals, and they use all these young women, highly sexualized, pubescent girls, as part of the ceremony, and that was creepy too, in its own way. But that was at a conclusion of a day where I'd already experienced so many much more terrifying things. I'd gone to a place called White Monkey Mountain. At the top, there is the Devil's Cave, La Cava de Diablo, and that's where supposedly the original brujo, the famous brujo, is a man named Gonzalo Aguirre, known all through Mexico, by far the most famous witch Mexico has ever had. But his teacher was someone this man had died in 1968, and people were still afraid to say his name.
Wow.
And he had made his deal with the devil and renewed his deal with the devil, and reclaimed his powers with the devil, and occasionally took people to this cave, which is at the top of White Monkey Mountain. So I arrived there on this day, the first Friday in March, unaware that this is where the Zetas were going to hold their Black Mass, stage their Black Mass. And one thing I had been told is that, well, there are still some real brujos, but they work for the cartels. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to meet them. You don't want to, you need, everyone was telling me you need to stay away. I mean, it's the sort of place where I'd driven through a square where 40 headless bodies had been dumped as a way for the Zetas to communicate to the people there that we own you and we own this town. And so there was that atmosphere. So anyway, I arrive, and there were literally dozens of animals in cages that were going to be sacrificed. But there were also these two, probably 15 or 20 foot tall sheets, cloths with Gustave Dor's woodcuts of the devil that were, they appeared in John Milton's, the first edition of John Milton's Paradise Lost. And they were hanging there. To step over this rise, and suddenly there's all these animals in cages that are going to be sacrificed, and pictures of the devil, and a lot of Santa Muertes. As I'm getting ready to climb up this mountain and go into the cave, it was. It became a terrifying, but
But you go into this cave.
I did go into the cave.
When you go to the back of this cave, what do you see?
At the very back, inside the cave was eerie beyond description. That's where the water collects that comes down and fills these lagunas. It's this cave, which is I mean, it was already a hot day, but it was probably 30 degrees hotter in this cave.
Wow.
And so all this water is dripping down the walls and collecting in the mud and seeping around you. And the cave, lowers, the ceiling lowers as you're approaching it. The end, but I felt compelled to go to the end. There were candles inside. So I went to the very end, and there was this image of the hummingbird wizard, which was sort of the devil god of the Aztecs, the one who was the most thirsty for blood, and that they had to satisfy with, constant human sacrifice. And then while I'm there were a group of federales who told me, well, we're here right now, but we won't be here this evening, so you don't want to be back here after dark. But they said, the main reason is because, the animals won't be the only thing sacrificed. And
wow. That goes right back to Bernal Diaz, their description of Hernan climbing to the top of the tower in what is today called Mexico City, and seeing and demanding to see the idols. They didn't want to let him see them at first, but he demanded to see them. And the description of the smell alone, the caked on blood from literally hundreds of thousands of sacrifices over the 80 years that temple existed at the time Hernan shows up, is disgusting, to say the least. You can even imagine the flies that are probably present just because of all of the remains of human blood and whatever. And then the image itself that Hernan eventually would desecrate, praise be to God. But you're seeing this image there. And when you talk about it in your book, I got to tell you, I sit here and I think Our Lady of Guadalupe came and used a fallible person like Hernan Cortez to defeat Satan himself. And after reading Bernal's work, I have to believe Hernan, once he discovered the human sacrifice, that became the priority for him. He would die in the cause and have every Spaniard die in the cause to defeat Satan himself. It wasn't gold at that point in the journey that really motivates Hernan. It was, and he even told his men, don't fill your pockets with that gold. And then on the night of terrors, the men who get greedy, fill their pockets with gold, drowned while they're running for their lives, being chased out by the Aztecs. I find it interesting because what you're describing for us is the reality that the hummingbird wizard, he's back. He's back in Mexico. And is Mexico lost? I guess one of the first questions in my mind is Mexico a lost country? They seem to be playing with absolute fire down there.
Well, there are many wonderful, kind, generous Mexican people, and who were very helpful to and protective of me in that environment. And there's some very devout Catholics, but that other belief system, that pre-existing belief system, there's a sort of syncretism, as it's often called, between the two. And there are people who, they stay away from that completely. I went to the cathedral, first. Actually, it was the first place I went. And the women working, the priest was gone, but the women working in the office were tremendously helpful.
Wow.
And really told me how to stay safe, but they also told me how to find who the people were who actually knew something about this. But for them, this was, to be entirely avoided. They didn't want any association with it. But there were a lot of people there who, they are good people, they're Christian, but they have this attitude or belief that, well, this is a power that exists and you can use it, dark power.
Someone said that about nuclear weapons too. And just because we can do a thing doesn't mean we ought to do a thing. So I guess from my outsider's perspective, it really blows my mind to think of how dangerous this all really seems to be. And I've heard you talk about this as well, other places, about how the devil really boasts about retaking Mexico intentionally to cause grief to our Lord and to Our Lady. He seems to be very gleeful about his reconquest of Mexico.
Well, one of the things I write about is, I think, what is widely regarded as the best documented exorcism at least in U.S. history. It happened back in the 1920s. But the priest who conducted it basically talked to all of the demons in this woman. I mean, the details of what happened physically during that exorcism are what make it so incredible, and the fact that there were so many eyewitnesses who signed sworn statements. But so he was sending them out one by getting them to tell him who they were, and he got to the last one, who he believed was the devil himself, and the devil was saying, you think you've won, you haven't won. Do you know the history of Mexico? We've prepared quite a mess for him there. Let's see how he deals with it.
Wow.
And so that, having found that completely unexpectedly, right shortly after I got back from Mexico, it confirmed the sense I had that this culture of black magic and devil worship that is still alive in Mexico. It's an open secret. In fact, it's not a secret. It's in all the newspapers. Everyone, it's as public as could be, but you would never know that in the United States because no U.S. paper would ever write about it.
Yeah.
And I understood implicitly what that is that, it's sort of a fear of being, racist or, in any way, violating the taboos of political correctness. But when something is so out there and, when it's such an essential part of a culture, how do you ignore it? But I have to say that the people who've attacked my book have mainly attacked, what I wrote about Mexico and being in Mexico and what I saw, and it's been shocking to me that because, I'm not interpreting it. I'm certainly, I've met plenty of Mexican people that I love, and I describe how, the people there took care of me or kind to me and warned me about, the other Mexicans, you could say. It's like forbidden in the minds of some people to talk about any of this. We don't talk about that is the attitude, and you're treading on a different culture, and that was the excuse that has been used for so long to sort of cover up what the Aztecs did and who they were, and the National Archaeological Museum in Mexico has been the leading advocate of all this is all made up, and the idea that the Aztecs were devil worshipping cannibals is an idea imposed by these colonialist Spaniards, and but they keep finding evidence, and recently the most powerful evidence that it's all true. They found a spot where people were kept in cages and fattened up before they were to be sacrificed and eaten.
Wow.
And which, the name of the place in Nahuatl translates to where they ate them. So
they ate them. I'll let that sink in. What was it Mark Twain said? History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. I think we're there. I'm hearing the rhymes right now. Due the sake of time here, I want to ask you, what was your relationship with Father Benedict Rochelle? God rest his soul.
Well, he was a mentor. Initially he started out as someone I was sort of advised to speak to an interview before I could finish The Miracle Detective, to talk about how the church and how I should view these alleged miraculous events, apparitions, and locutions, and mystical visions in general, because he was the church's leading authority on it. And he sort of helped me. The main thing he did was say, you can have doubt and faith both. That doubt is part of faith, and you should doubt, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have faith. Obviously, you were deeply moved by what you experienced in Medjugorje, and it was real to you, and you should honor that by all means. But you can be skeptical about the details, and as he was. And so he was tremendously helpful to me in that regard, in kind of affirming faith but respecting doubt. And so when I was about to embark on this book, he told me he would be, my advisor, mentor. I only saw him once after I started the book. As you know, he died in the midst of it, and so I wasn't able to sustain that. But the last time I saw him and I talked about what I was doing, he said, "Well, it's important you're doing this, but be careful, be very, very careful." Essentially, I mean, you'd be wise to pray before and after every one of these encounters.
Yeah, for sure. There was, it's interesting because part of your book also takes us into the deep darkness. That's for sure. But it also, there's moments of light in there. Like you talk about the most famous witch in Mexico, and you share the story of him and his daughter. And the reality is, towards the end of his life, he recognizes he needs to, it's time to pull the chute or else.
Yeah.
And towards the end of his life, he's trying, before he passes off this dark legacy to his daughter, he needs to be frank with her about the real consequences of that. Then there's the man that the last man who was hung as a sentence of execution in America. So in spite of our fascination with the occult, in spite of the fact that we like to toy, dance with, play with these demons, Ouija boards, horoscopes, you name them, there's still hope, but we better pay attention now before it is too late. Would you say?
I'd say that I don't think we need to go around, see the devil around every corner. And I don't think we should live in fear of the devil, but we should certainly live in the awareness that the devil exists, that there is a force, a spirit of evil that is feeding off every negative, from petty spite to, the darkest deeds. And it's feeding on the enmity between us. I mean, the country is bitterly divided, and both sides seem to increasingly hate each other. And it struck me that, wow, if you could just make people understand that we have a common enemy, one that glories in all the hatred we feel for each other, it might, be a way for us to look at each other with a little more compassion.
It is bizarre, isn't it, how society, and again, I find this on both sides of the political aisle for sure. Both sides of this they'll embrace this sort of caricature of the devil. They love the caricature of the devil.
Yeah.
It's all fun and games to them.
Well, I mean, that's how
costumes, concerts, all of it, and they have no idea what they're really doing.
No, they don't. And the people who want to mock the idea, I mean, they're mocking the idea of a, red-skinned hominid with horns and hooves. And, the devil is a spirit.
Right.
It's a spirit of evil, and a spirit of separation, and a spirit of corruption that, we may need representations for our human mind to comprehend it as a person. But, that's not what it is. So, I mean, it's this pervasive thing. I mean, I did write about my own personal struggle with my own failings as a person. But I decided early on I wasn't going to try to write a book about all the ordinary day-to-day temptations we face, because that book's already been written brilliantly by C.S. Lewis. But I was going to write about the fact that, that there are people, events, places that, can make it clear to you that there's no alternative word. There's no synonym for evil. Evil is what evil is. And we have to face that it's there, that it exists.
So let me ask you a question then. After all you have seen, experienced firsthand over these many years that you've been doing your work, especially in that cave, I would argue, that cave, Are you afraid to go to bed at night? Are you afraid to close your eyes? Do you have
No.
terrible dreams? Are you scared of the dark and the shadows?
No.
Why not?
I get scared for other people, like maybe someone close to me or near to me. But I'm not even that well, because, I've prayed for protection, because I felt protected. When I went into that cave, I'm not a Marian Christian per se. My devotion is more directed at Jesus than it is at Mary. But I notice that I do turn to her in particularly difficult or dangerous, or
Moms are good like that. Moms are very helpful when it comes to that stuff.
So before I went into that cave, I said a Hail Mary, and it's amazing the calm that brought me to go in. I didn't feel alone, and it was something that I experienced a number of times on that trip. I'd be around people that I knew could kill me or thinking about killing me, and it was almost as if they got deflected somehow.
Wow.
And I felt, but I did feel as if, I was afraid. I was afraid the whole time.
Sure, of course.
But I also felt, kind of safety and protection. And one of the things Michelle, my companion, that 4'11" piece of stick of dynamite, said, at one point was we were going to go and witness this Black Mass, and I was, I admitted I was, just disturbed about the thought of being in. And she said, I'm not, because evil can only get in you if you let it in you, and I'm not going to let it in me. She just said it so simply, and I thought, well, that is the crux of it. Evil really can't reach us unless we let it reach us.
I've heard many exorcists say that the shenanigans, the stuff that Hollywood loves to portray when it comes to the devil, the diabolic, occult, exorcisms, the levitations, the spewing of projectile vomiting, all of that stuff, it happens, but it's more rare than we would expect it to be. And most exorcists don't actually see that, because once you've gotten used to their tricks, you realize they're spoiled brats with superior intellect, and they're dogs on a leash, and they're only allowed to do so much. And so the shenanigans don't actually scare them at that point. Would you say in your own life that might be true for you? In the beginning, it's the fireworks, but then over time, it's maybe something more subtle?
Well, yes, but I would say that my sense that I was protected, that there were other spirits around me that were protecting me, and supporting me, grew as time went on. What I was afraid of mainly was that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. And I struggled with this book. I postponed it, procrastinated. I wrote 6 other books. Between the time I started this book and finished it, I wrote 6 other books, because I didn't want to face the task of it. And I would often, if I had a conversation with God, it would be, this isn't me. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not qualified. There's somebody better. Why am I doing this? And I didn't get any answer other than sort of, okay, well, take your time, but it's your job. And but that also dissipated, because I thought, I'm doing the best. This is the best I can do. I know I've done the best I can do with this. And I was supported and protected by something.
Amen. Yeah, praise be to God. Well, we've been talking with Randall Sullivan. The book is The Devil's Best Trick: How the Face of Evil Disappeared. And if you read it, I'm going to tell you, you're going to realize the devil is real and he is alive. But we need not be afraid. I think that's the trick here. And I think it's the bottom line, which is why I wanted to ask that towards the end. We need not be afraid. Trust in God. The devil isn't the equal and opposite to God. He is a creature just like you and me. He has his limits, but God is infinite. Praise be to Jesus. Randall, I'm really grateful for your time today. Thank you for sharing your insight and this book with us.
Thanks for having me, Joseph.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.